Welcome to Community Conversations. I'm your host, Steve Mantis, and my guest today is Celina Reitberger, the chair of the Thunder Bay Police Services Board. Welcome, Celina.
Good morning.
So, Celina, I had you on last year, the year before, just as you were finishing your career as the lead at the Anishinaabe-Aski Legal Services. So you became a retired person, and now you jumped right back into the fray.
What was I thinking?
Exactly.
I now tell people I'm retired in quotes because really I'm working harder than ever.
Right. Well, so tell me a little bit about the Police Services Board. What's their role?
Well, we are the civilian oversight for the Thunder Bay Police Service. Our role is to direct policies, procedures, deal with certain situations. One of our biggest roles, of course, is the hiring of the chief and the deputy chief. So right now we are in the process of accepting applications for the deputy chief, and then the next meeting is on the 18th. On the 17th, we will go through the applications and do the shortlisting. So that's pretty major. It's, when you think about it, to have volunteers doing this job, it's pretty amazing, and onerous. It's very onerous to have this responsibility.
So how much time do you have to spend? Now, as a chair, you'd probably spend more than most of the side members.
Yes. I'm probably doing at least 3 or 4 hours a day. Telephone conversations, reading, researching, emails. So I started taking down my hours just to see, and it does add up.
And is there any kind of honorarium or anything, or is it totally volunteer?
Yes. Oh, yes. There is an honorarium when you go to meetings.
So it's just those days, though, that you're actually at meetings.
Which is fine.
And how many other people are on the Police Services Board?
Well, the total is supposed to be 5. We have myself, Kristen Oliver, Georgianne Morisseau, who's the vice chair, and Mayor Morrow. So we did have our 5th person appointed, and then that did not go well, so we're looking for a 5th person now. So we're down one. But we also have our administrator, Tom Lockwood, who will be involved with us for the year, and who's very knowledgeable in the area and is providing a great deal of guidance and assistance.
And who does the appointment for the Police Services Board?
Well, there's 2 appointees. One is the city and one is the province. So I'm a provincial appointee. The other person who we're waiting on will be appointed by the province, and then there are 3 from the city.
And are they usually all city councillors or mayors from the city, or?
That has been the case. There have been situations where it's been 2 aldermen. The previous board was 2 aldermen, and then an ordinary citizen who has applied to be on the Police Services Board. There's surprisingly a lot of interest, people wanting to be on the Police Services Board, which is a good thing.
Is there an application process, or
yes.
how to people get involved?
You can go online. With the provincial government, it is a generic website, but you would be able to find. I wouldn't be able to find it, but others would.
I share kind of my lack of confidence in my ability with technology these days.
Yes.
I'm struggling. I'm locked out of my email right now, and I'm freaking out.
It's a blessing.
Well, maybe that'll be the next stage. Right now, it's
yes. That's right.
So, what's the length of the term? Like, how long are you appointed for?
Well, my term is up November of 2019, so that will mean I've been on the board for 2 years. I am hopeful that the province will reappoint me, but given the new leadership in Toronto, we can't say. But I'm ready to go on if they want me to.
And so So you have both a hiring decision for the top two positions with the police. You also, do you set policy or you approve
Yes,
policy?
we approve. We are always consulted on police policy, or we're made aware of police policy. But for our own policies, at this point in time, they're woefully lacking, and so we are hoping to strike a committee, and we have a list of policies that we are, through the OCPC, required to come to devise or draft. So that's a big job ahead of us, and we're ready to do that.
So the
OCPC.
OCPC, who are they? Ontario.
They're the police oversight for the province. So the Ontario, I never remember what it stands for. You can Google it.
So they set the kind of the framework for all of the different police forces.
They have oversight for the police service boards. So for example, it's almost every month that a representative from the ministry comes to our meetings and observes and gives advice. He's there if we have a question about what we're doing. So there are overseers, yeah.
And are the meetings open or are they closed meetings?
We actually both. So we have a standard agenda, and then we add, for example, last month we had 3 presentations. We had a presentation from Wake the Giant. It's early.
The sleeping giant, wake
That's
up.
right, Wake the Giant, which was very interesting. We had a couple of other presentations that were more information about the police, but all very good. You know, we do accept deputations at the open session, and then about halfway through the morning, when we finish that agenda, we go into the closed sessions where we deal with things like labor relations, etc.
Right. Oh my gosh. So in terms of operations, do you have any role to play in terms of operations with the police?
We are not to interfere with the operations. We
Okay.
are, that is the chief of police, the deputy, that's their job. And if we overstep that bounds, we're going to get into big trouble.
So more or less, you have 2 employees, the top 2. Their job is to figure out operations, and yours is to really advise or guide them through that process.
And we hear, we get updates about what the operations are. So as I shared with you earlier, you know, we're going to be hearing from Chief Sylvie Hott about the progress. It's been 6 months since we got the OIPRD report, and so she's going to provide, in the open session, she's going to provide us with an update of what has been accomplished to date.
So this was the report that found the police force or the service was lacking in terms of inclusion or something, and it's now responding to that?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Well, we need to take a short break. Please stay with us. We're going to be right back, and we'll find out a little bit more about what's in store for our Thunder Bay Police Services. Welcome back to Community Conversations. I'm your host, Steve Mantis, and my guest today is Celina Reitberger, the chair of the Thunder Bay Police Services Board. Welcome back, Celina.
Thank you.
So at the end of the last segment, you had mentioned the review that was done by the
The OIPRD, the
Right.
Ontario Independent Police Review Director.
And
That one I can remember.
And what did they find? What was the essence of that report? What
Well, the
did it
essence
say?
is that there exists within the force, within the service, systemic racism. Now, the R word evokes a lot of emotion.
Oh, totally.
Yes, but what needs to be understood is that systemic racism does not refer to people and how they behave. It refers to a system and how this system is set up in such a way that there's not equal treatment for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you know, it's obvious that in any society there will be people who have racist attitudes, but that's not what we're talking about. That's not what the OIPRD was talking about. However, we are hyper vigilant about making sure that we are aware of any activities that may have a racist tinge to them, and we're certainly overseeing how these things are being dealt with.
Really through the policy and how would that be accurate?
Yes, and we receive reports on a monthly basis in the closed sessions about complaints and compliments that the police have received.
Okay. So, so what kind of steps, what's the goal now in terms of the Police Services Board in responding to that report and those recommendations?
Well, we're going to get the update in June, but I know that the first, even before we received the report, the chief struck an organizational change committee of officers and civilians who have been working diligently to revamp the Aboriginal Liaison Unit. So that is something that is well underway. And in addition, they're going to be looking at other ways of improving the service. So I think the next thing that they're going to be looking at is recruitment and retention. So we want to see more Indigenous people on the force, and we want to see more diversion, more inclusion. So that is something that they will be informing us of how they're going to proceed. Of course, we'll have a similar goals, but we, as you say, we deal with it through policy and procedure. So one of the really interesting recommendations was that people who are hired will undergo psychological testing to determine whether or not they have racist tendencies, which I think is a pretty exciting recommendation, but whether or not it works, that remains to be seen.
Well, I'm wondering if I applied, I would probably be found to have racist tendencies because for whatever reason, growing up or whatever, I had those attitudes. I sometimes, like the other day, I pulled up by City Hall and parked my car and I looked and there was 5 Indigenous men sitting there and I'm kind of going, do I have to worry? So I just stopped and said, oh, do I have to worry? My emotions immediately came up.
Well,
to me,
yes.
I feel like that's discrimination somehow. And I thought about it and went, no, I don't have to worry about it. Everything's fine. But that immediate, I'm sure in a psychological test, they'd find that out and go, Steve, look, you're like a whatever.
Is there a question in there?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Well, it's in a way, our society, I think, has systemic racism built into it.
Of course, yes.
So
agreed.
we all, whether we think about it or not, are influenced by that. So the relationship between individuals and the system is very complex.
Very complex.
I know that...
but a lot of it has to do with education. So you are obviously educating yourself on what it looks like, and you're dealing with it in your own way. But that will be part of moving forward. It will be, and it was a recommendation. I can't remember, I get those 2 reports mixed up, but ongoing training. It's not just, I passed the psychological test, I don't have to worry about this anymore. No, there will be ongoing training within the service, and people will be promoted based upon their performance in that area. So if they have received the training and they've figured it out, they will be the ones who will be moving forward in the force.
And in terms of the makeup of the police force, I've been an advocate for people with disabilities for many years, and we've advocated that the workplaces should have the same number of people with disabilities as their overall population. That's
a good rule of thumb.
With women, with other at-risk groups, Indigenous people, people of color, people that aren't normally represented as effectively in the workforce. Is that kind of approach being taken by the police services? Like you talked about increasing the number of Indigenous police officers. Is there a target, or where does that increase go to?
Well,
What's the goal there?
I think the goal would be proportional representation. So the present percentage, I think, is 13%. And the association would say that they've already reached that goal because, they know who has identified it as Indigenous.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's also, moving forward, we want to up that profile. So we may have to, not just stick with the very rigid 13%, but there's also Métis people who we would welcome. So in terms of people with disability, I don't think you're going to see many of people with disability on the beat because of the nature of the job. I mean, it's just very difficult, very physical. So, but in terms of the civilian side, for sure, people should be applying.
Right on. So in the short term, so you talked about a committee kind of being struck to look at policy development.
Yes.
You're talking about, you put out a call for hiring for the deputy. What are some of the other activities the Police Services Board is involved with?
One of the big ones moving forward will be a business plan. We have to develop a business plan that is reflective of what we saw in these reports. So this is going to be a big job, and it's going to be more public consultation. We're going to hopefully have more circles with the Indigenous population that we promised at our first circle, which was the recognition and acknowledgement circle that there existed systemic racism. It might be a good time to look at my paperwork and tell you what systemic racism is, because people get confused. People think, oh my goodness, that was the first reaction of the Police Association. They came out with a statement, we have no racist officers. And we're going, that's not what this is about. So it's a hard thing for people to get their heads around. Systemic racism defined. Ontario Human Rights Commission defines systemic discrimination for racialized groups as patterns, behaviors, policies, and practices that are part of a structure of an organization and which create or perpetuate disadvantages for racialized persons. That is to say, systemic discrimination is perpetuated by a system, organization, or culture rather than the result of isolated actions. It becomes embedded into normal organized life and operates as part of the system.
We're going to have to take a short break, Celina. Sorry. We'll be right back, and we're going to find out a little bit more about systemic racism. Welcome back to Community Conversations. I'm your host, Steve Mantis, and my guest today is Celina Reitberger, the chair of the Thunder Bay Police Services Board. So, Celina, you were just giving us really the definition from the Human Rights Commission about systemic racism.
Right.
Can you expand a little bit about that? What does that look like? How do you see that?
Well, I was going to launch into the description of the recent report from missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, where it's pointed out quite clearly that there was a system in place. Let's talk about just the RCMP, for example. If an Indigenous woman went missing, it wasn't taken seriously. Oh, she'll be back. There was no, the whole system was set up to treat this differently because Indigenous women, sadly, are not valued as much as other women. And we've seen the results. Losses, deaths, uninvestigated, unresolved. And we're starting to look at it with new eyes, and hopefully we will stop the human trafficking that goes on now, sadly.
Well, I've seen it change in Thunder Bay around that, because now I hear on the radio every so often I have an alert that someone's gone missing.
Yes.
And if anyone has information, please give a call. Now, that's new to me. I can't remember hearing those kind of things
No,
before.
it's the new missing persons policy that is working. I mean, I get them all the time on my phone, and you know, you just think, oh my God, you know, look at this young person has gone missing, and you just feel badly. And then when they show, we found them, and you can get rid of this notice, you just feel so relieved. But I think that segues into a point I wanted to make, which is the police have been very busy since the inquest, since the 7 Youth inquest, doing things differently. So I think we need to get more of that information out there. But one of the things that I would like to talk about is the situation table. Now, the situation table is a group of maybe 30 organizations that have come together, and they've put a system in place which is remarkable in terms of its details and how well it works. So I was privileged to sit in on one of their meetings, and the police will bring, well, not necessarily just the police, will bring a case before the situation table, and they will talk about it's chronic offenders. So we're talking about, okay, if someone is involved with the police every night because of their addiction, they're in their addictions, this is taking a lot of really expensive resources away from guns and gangs and other human trafficking, the serious things. So the situation table will determine if the case meets the criteria, and then canvass the group, and people will volunteer. So this organization may say, well, we're perfect for this case. So then you've got half a dozen people who are going to take over this case, and at the next stage of the meeting is they have a caucus and decide moving forward how they're going to help this person. So one of the successes that was shared with me was last summer they decided to work with youth who were chronically down by the river. There were 10 that they counted, and they brought them to the situation table, and they were successful with 5. But having 5 people stop this very dangerous behavior is a huge win. And it's also, in terms of dollar signs, once you take people out of their chronic involvement with the police, we are going to realize incredible savings.
And so when you have examples of success, does that translate into changes in the overall police services?
Well, yes,
like
of
is there
course.
learnings that happen along the way that get put into policy or procedures or practices?
Wow. Well, of course, we want to keep this going. So when we're doing our policies, we may indeed address the situation table. But I think it's a question, what it shows is how collaboration can work. The police can't do it all by themselves. I went on a ride along, sorry. And, you know, I was very impressed at how emergency services and the mental health workers work together with the police. If there's in my case, a young woman was at the Brodie Street Library, and she was texting or emailing her mother with suicidal thoughts. And it was so impressive of how everyone just went into action, and we searched the whole library and tried to find the woman, and you know, it was just a really good example of people working together.
And I think that's probably a big part of our solution is that police are oftentimes there to pick up where society isn't functioning as well as it could.
Exactly.
And
it's not just policing anymore, it's social work.
Yeah, so
Huge component.
Those partnerships seem to be a key to success. How do we make that substantive move really to deal with some of those societal problems that end up at the police doorstep before they ever get there?
Well, that's what we're working on in terms of our partnerships. So, for example, one of the things that I was advocating for was a safe sobering site. You don't bring young Indigenous people to the jail and house them in a cell when they've been drinking. They need to go to a place where they can get a bed to sleep in, a meal, and then counseling. Because we want to stop the cycle. And, you know, I haven't seen any cycles being stopped in the police cells. So I think we are very keen on taking innovative policing methods, partnerships, and moving away from putting drunk people in jail.
So Celina, we're down to the last little bit here. If people want to find out more or get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
Well, I have a private email that I am willing to share, or you can share it with people afterwards. But the other thing, I would encourage people to come out to some of our meetings. We're now no longer meeting at the police station. Our new home will be Mary J. L. Black, although we had
The library in Fort,
yes,
in Westport.
Yep, and we're hoping that
It's on
people...
Edward Street, is it?
Brown.
Brown Street, okay, sorry.
It's Brown. Brown or Edward. People can find
where
it.
do
It's
you
next
find
to the
out-
community center.
And the dates are posted?
Well, we have a new website we just launched a month ago. And so you can go on and find out what time the meeting starts. We have posted the agenda. We will post the agendas. We will also post minutes. So we're trying to be more open.
On that note, we have to say thank you very much for joining us. And I encourage people to get involved and find out more in terms of the dynamics of our local city. Please stay safe and see you again next week.